It is right on Wednesday's recap from Sunday's video on English as a world language. And I am here on today to just recap the takeaways from Sunday's video. We are in series 4, which is Understanding English Grammar, and this is actually part 2. So I'm going to jump right in. One thing I realized, I'm going to stop putting times on the advertisements, and then that way I can just come on when I get on. It's Facebook Live. It's notifying you guys, when I'm on, and then of course you can always go back and watch it. So I was so glad I didn't put a time on this particular series, just simply because I could come in, get it done, and move on with my day, and then you guys can watch it at your leisure. It is going to repost and on Friday, because I'm uploading all of these videos to YouTube, and then in YouTube they are actually being uploaded into their playlist. Some of the other earlier series, they are all uploaded, so if you've missed any parts of the series, if you missed series 1 or series 2 or series 3, you can most definitely go back and watch those on my YouTube page, which is Adrian Harris Method, and you can watch them on Facebook. All of them show up in Facebook underneath the videos, so that information is there for you to see it whenever or if ever you need the information. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My first takeaway for this particular part is that English is a world language. We talked about on Sunday how quickly the English language is spreading and how vast the language is, just in the sense of how many people a day are actually learning the English language. So our second takeaway was just that there are 1 billion people currently in the world learning English worldwide, and that number is expected to double according to Kenneth Beare from his article, How Many People Learn English, that was written in May of this year, 2017. That number is expected to double by 2020. So English is a very big deal. We talked about the fact that it's on demand, or it's in such a high demand, because the rising global market and English dominating this spectrum causes other people to have to accept the language of international business, which is English. English is the language of international business. So if I'm going to operate in the business world, and I'm going to operate specifically in international business, then I've got to learn and know the English language. So that's probably one of the reasons, I believe one of the reasons it's growing so rapidly, because we've gotten, because of technology, we're just able to reach more people in more places much faster than we could before the internet really boomed as it is now. Before apps, before iPhones, before we had many computers in our pockets, we just weren't able to communicate as quickly with one another. So now that we're able to communicate much faster than we did in times past, then you have a market, a global market, and business realms that are just able to interact with one another much faster. They've always existed. We've always been able, not necessarily always, but we've seen trade happen between nations before. We've seen communication happen between nations before, but we just haven't seen it being done this quickly. So one thing the English language does is it binds, it connects us. Of course, if I can speak the same language as you and there's no language barrier, then I'm going to be able to have a conversation with you more quickly and get an understanding as to what you are trying to say, and then possibly what I'm trying to say, so on and so forth. If you're learning a foreign language, or you're talking to somebody whose language is not the same as yours, their native tongue is not the same as yours, we probably can all testify that it's sometimes just kind of hard to follow the conversations. Some of my good friends, they're from Jamaica, and sometimes they get to talking and it's like, what did y'all just say? And I've known them for years, and it's like, huh? What? Go back, say that again. And so the language differences create understanding barriers. So because English is such a dominating language, and because people are learning it much faster and at a much rapid pace, I believed in times past, and I say that because back in 2003, according to the book that I've been getting my information from, it's called Understanding English Grammar. 1/3 of the world's population was speaking English then in 2003. So we're going to see that, we're going to see the 1 billion people who are currently learning the English. Guys, that's going to double in the next 2.5 years. So you have an increase of number of people learning the English language. And it's apparently it's needed, especially again, guys, in the global markets, in the international business. So another interesting fact that I shared on Sunday is that English is the universal language for air traffic control. So if I am a Russian and I am flying a Russian plane, I still have to speak English if I'm talking to the air traffic control. And I just really thought that was a profound fact, because I did not know that information. I had no clue that, you know, if I was Italian, I couldn't speak Italian to the air traffic control. So that's something, if I'm a pilot, I need to know that information. If I'm a pilot whose native tongue is not English, do you guys see how big of a deal the language is? Because these people, in order to qualify to even fly, now they have to learn the English language if they don't already know it. So big deal if you are a speaker of English. Big deal if you are a person who is not a native speaker of English and you are learning the language. There are reasons why people who are not native speakers, whose mother tongue is not English, there are various reasons as to why they want to learn English. Maybe they want to eventually come over here and go to school. Maybe eventually they want to come over to the United States or another English-speaking country whose dominant language is English. Maybe they want to go to those countries and work, you know. So the English language is a very big deal. Again, it is a world language. And guys, people on a daily basis, 1 billion people are currently learning English worldwide. Wow. That's 1 billion, not million. All right, so our last takeaway for this particular series, that there is no one correct, no one proper version of the English language. Now, we all know that there is a standard to the English language. So in standard writing, typically it's not okay to say you ain't. However, because of regionalism, and that word is language structures that vary from region to region, because of regionalism, if I'm talking to my sister, if I'm talking to my mother, or if I'm talking to someone else in a regular conversation, then me saying I ain't is appropriate in that conversation. However, if I was writing a cover letter, or if I was submitting a professional email to my boss, or a professional email to another company, I would not use that terminology. We also talked about, you know, if I'm a novelist and I'm writing a fictional piece, then using regionalism in the dialect of various regions, that's appropriate. So how your language looks and what your language looks like depending on your region is important. And we're going to actually get into next week what is grammar, and it's going to discuss specifically what grammar is and how we have these language competencies, and how the language, I guess I don't want to say standard, how certain things vary based on region, even though it's one language. So we're going to get into regionalism, I believe, a little bit more on next week. But I am going to go ahead and define what grammar is, because remember from our first video, we talked about the fact that grammar is in us. It's innate in us. We just have to have that grammar that's already in us. That language competence specifically is what is called triggered. And so once that is triggered, then we are learning the English language as far as it relates to grammar, so that we can be more conscious of that which we already subconsciously use every day. The more conscious I am of something, then the more circumspect I'm going to use it. So my punctuation, my sentence structure is going to be just that much tighter, because I'm conscious of how the sentence is supposed to be structured, because I've been taught that which I already know. So I just think that's still probably my favorite takeaway from the series still is the fact that this information, language competence, is already in us. And because it's already in us, we're just literally waiting on something or someone to say something to us, to teach us something, for us to get wind of something so that we have an understanding of, oh, okay, so that's what a simple sentence is. Oh, that's why you don't use a dangling modifier. So what we're really looking for, and what grammar and teaching grammar is really doing for us, is really answering some questions to why. Why is that a run-on sentence? Why is that considered a fragment? It's not it's just teaching us the why of what we already know how to use. From the first series that I did, the example I gave is a baby. You don't sit a child down and say, I am sleepy, to teach them how to properly say, I am sleepy. Over time, they hear their parents. Over time, they hear correct sentence structure, and they just begin to form sentences correctly. So that's what I mean by language competence, the ability to form sentences and put verbs and pronouns and nouns in their correct order according to the standard that is the English language. That is what I'm saying when I talk about language competence. So our last takeaway deals with that to a degree, just in the sense of there are dialects within the English language. And so within these dialects, there are ways to use these words, and there are ways to structure various sentences based off of the dialect of certain regions. Is it standard? Not necessarily. So I do want to just again reiterate, there is a standard to the English language. There are just some things that are acceptable when you're talking about writing the English language, speaking the English language in more and broader spectrum than may be important in my particular region, in my circle of influence. There may be some words that I can use that I can't use anywhere else. And so some other examples that we are all familiar with when it comes to regionalism is here in the United States, what we'll say down south, we call Coca-Cola soda. Well, up north, you may go up and hear Coca-Cola called pop. Down here in the south, we say y'all with our southern accents and draws. We say y'all. And then in other places, they break the word down and say you all. Like I think I shared on Sunday, I don't hear my southern accent because I've been speaking it all my life, and I'm around other people who have accents like mine. So I don't necessarily hear it unless I'm around other people, or of course other people can hear like, oh, you from down south, simply because they're not used to it. So we all have that experience. We've heard people speak like, girl, where you from? Because they don't sound like you. Or they don't sound like people you hear on a regular basis, and you hear that they're from another part of the city or even another part of the state. So we know that language structures vary from region to region, and this is what it means by there's no one correct or no one proper version of the English language. But guys, it's not talking about the version of the English standard when it comes to writing. There are some grammar rules that exist down south that exist in the same structure as it is up north. So there's a difference between the English language and how it's spoken, and it being a variation because of dialect, and then there in between the actual grammar and composing of writing, there's a standard for that. There is a standard for that. That's how come I can teach on writing, because the standard doesn't change. I was sleepy, I skipped dinner, and you don't have a punctuation between the two of those. That's a run-on. You know, I put a comma in it, now we have a comma splice. You know, I put a semicolon, now we have correct grammatical structure within those two sentences. So those are some standards that we deal with in the English language when it comes to writing. But saying y'all down south is great. It's okay. If I'm just in casual conversation, like y'all, everybody knows what I'm talking about. If I say soda down here in the south, everyone knows what I'm talking about, because soda and pop are words that people typically are familiar with being identified with different regions. That's probably a word that's interchangeable between, you know, down south in the United States and then up north. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. That is pretty much all I have for this particular series. Next week, we're going to get into specifically what is grammar. And it's going to explain, I believe, a little bit more what I mean by language competence. What does grammar entail? Because sometimes grammar is confused with mechanics. And we throw punctuation into it. Like when the students come to the writing center and they want help. Well, I need help with my grammar. And so it's like, okay, so specifically what do you need help with when it comes to your grammar? And so then they may say, well, I need punctuation, or my teacher said I keep using past tense, you know. And so then you have these different areas of writing, and I think we lump them all the same, and they're not necessarily supposed to be lumped together. That's in this same book. And guys, I'm so sorry, I just keep leaving it so that I can show it to you all. But in this same book, punctuation is at the very end, the very last chapter, and it deals with nouns, it deals with verbs, it deals with dangling modifier. The book deals with phrases and clauses, and all of this is under the umbrella of grammar. So grammar and mechanics and punctuation, we use them all together, but they do have their separate functions when you're talking about writing correctly when it comes to the standard of English as it relates to writing. Not necessarily the English language. That has to do with dialects and words and word choice and that kind of thing. But when you're talking about putting sentences together, guys, I do want to make that distinction. There is a standard for that. There is a standard for that here for us in the United States and for people who are learning the English language. How can it not be a standard so that there's some unity and conformity somewhere where we all are on the same page? So me saying y'all and you all isn't as much of a big deal as me being able to structurally connect and appropriately write a sentence, and then me passing that on to someone else and them being able to understand exactly what I wrote. So there is a way to write. There is a standard way to write. But we know within the English language, there are various dialects, and then there are versions of the English language. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. If not, you guys, please let me know, and I'll go back and revisit it. I'm probably going to revisit that again anyway as the series continues, especially as we get more into what is grammar. I think once I define what grammar is, then I think it'll help this make sense, because the dialects don't necessarily have anything to do with the actual learning grammar, if you will. Okay, my dialect doesn't throw out the window that I need to have a subject and a verb in order for my sentence to be a sentence, you know, or I can't say because she went home and put a period at the end and say, hey, that's a sentence. Well, in the English language, we know that's a fragment. So that's what I mean by standard. But I may say in that same fragment, because y'all didn't go to the movies, period, well, then my regionalism may show up with that use of y'all. So I hope that makes sense. As we get more, I believe more into it, specifically what is grammar, which we are going to get into on next week. I think that it'll help make sense of what I'm saying. So you may need to watch this series, of course, in its proper order. So first was understanding English grammar, where we just really talked about that native speakers of the English language, they are experts. We talked about how we have a language competence already built on the inside of us. It just needs to be triggered. And then we also discussed how we need to learn the grammar that we already subconsciously know so that we can be conscious users of it. And then this week we're talking about how English is a world language. Why does it matter? Because if you don't know English, just plain old English, then how are you going to properly use grammar in its correct context? So in order for us to understand English grammar, we have to understand the function of English, guys, in the world, because it's such an international dominating language. International businesses use English. Our rising global markets use English. I think I shared with you guys on Sunday The Story of English, an old PBS special from like 1986. One thing they said is you'll have people whose first tongue may be, I think they said Hindu, if I'm not mistaken, and or what language did they say? We'll say French because I don't remember the specific language. But their first language is French, and what they'll do is, in maybe something like their court system, you have people who are in there filing lawsuits in English, but that's not even their first language. I think in the video, whatever the language was, they had one person who was actually doing work and documenting various things in that native tongue. They had one person out of a room full of people. Everybody else was using English. It also talked about in that same video how one country, they march and protest in English because the airwaves are more dominated by English language channels. So I think that's just awesome. Like, because we don't think about that. We don't think about why people in other countries, we see signs when they're protesting in English, because they know that when it gets aired abroad, it's going to get aired in English, and they want people to be able to understand the language. And how smart is that? If 1 billion people are currently learning the English language worldwide, then somebody who sees the show is going to be able to recognize what they're actually out there protesting for, or what they're trying to get out of their protest, because they can read the signs. I can read the signs. Even if I don't know their native tongue, I know my native tongue, and they know that the airwaves are dominated by English speaking people who run English, whose CEOs know English, and they know that English is a huge deal worldwide. So how smart is that? How smart is that to protest in English, even if that's not your native tongue? I think that's huge, very, very big deal. So that's all I have for you guys on today. I thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Whenever you get a chance to view this video, just understand that English is a world language. We don't just speak English over here in the United States, and that's it. People are learning the English language every day, and it's a huge, huge deal as it relates to international markets and international business. It's a huge deal because of the media. It's a huge deal just period, because English is such a dominating language, and people are continuously learning the English language. And because that is true, knowing the standard English grammar is going to give us an advantage, because everybody is using it. It's becoming more common than it was back in the day. And so now what's going to give you an advantage when it comes to English? And guys, I'm telling you, writing is an advantage. If you can write and do it well, you are giving yourself an advantage over other people. That I know for sure. Why? Because this is messing us up. Texting is messing us up. It's making us lazy. We're not putting our punctuations in the right spot. We're not capitalizing words. Autocorrect will mess your message up. So learning the English language on top of, and then next, learning the grammar rules consciously. Guys, native speakers of the English language, you are already subconsciously know the language. And guys, for those of you who may see this and you are not familiar with the English language, or you are in the process, you're one of the 1 billion people who are currently learning the language. I believe the same is true for you. Your native tongue is what's innate in you. So we talked about on the first video that we learn grammar, you guys learn grammar, or I may learn Spanish, and my native tongue is going to serve as a comparison base to me. I know I add S to cats if I want to make cats, if I want to make it plural. So in this other language I'm learning, maybe adding AMOS, or I know for sure adding an A in Spanish makes the word female. I don't know if that's all the time, but I do remember if you add an A to it, it makes the gender indication. So knowing those things, so now I can say my comparison is she. That's a gender specific word in language. So that's all I have, guys. that's it. That's why we're doing it. I hope that even the order makes sense, just to understand that English grammar is in us. Then we have to talk about, well, why is English such an important language? Why even focus on English? Because we're looking at English grammar. And then so next we are going to jump into, well, what is grammar? Adrian, what is grammar? So I'm going to share that information with you guys on next week. So tune in on next week. Again, I'm not sure what time I'm going to come on. I'm not even sure if I'm not going to pre-record the video and then just upload it for you all. That may be an option as well for me. I will see. And if not, I'll see you guys hopefully sometime on next week with Series 4, Part 3. What is grammar? Should hit your timelines at some point on probably Saturday. What I'm doing is I upload advertisements and all of that stuff starting so that it starts on Saturday, because I usually go live at some point on Sunday. So those are my intentions. Hopefully I will get a chance to carry out my intentions and just come to you guys on next week with what is grammar. We are in Series 4, Part 3. I thank you guys so much for watching. Please share the videos. Please like the videos. I am getting feedback from, you know, people are watching the videos. They are telling other people about the videos, or they have the intentions. I know for sure the cover letter series that I'm working on, the young lady who requested it, she's like, hey, I'm going to make sure that, you know, I have people who could use it. So I'm sure she's sharing the video. I believe she is. So I don't mind you guys sharing. That's the whole point. Please share the videos. Comment. If something I said is not clear to you, let me know. Just send a comment. Of course, I'm getting the notifications for the information. And the links on YouTube are, you know, comment ready or friendly. I didn't cut the comments off. So visit us on YouTube. There are some videos on YouTube that have not made it to Facebook. I don't think the reverse is true. I believe I've uploaded everything off of Facebook to YouTube, but there are some videos on YouTube that have not been uploaded on Facebook, just simply because I have not gotten to two of the series. I shared with you guys I'm going to get to the cover letter series in October. It will hit your timeline in October. So that'll give me a chance to break from the live videos. So I'm just going to let those actual informational videos be my Sunday spots, and they won't recap. They'll probably just play twice a week, and then I'll upload some articles for you guys to read, and then, you know, keep with that regular advertisements that I'm doing here on Facebook. And then there's a reading series. If you know a college student who may be struggling with their college reading, then there is a series on YouTube that addresses those issues. So at some point, I may upload that information to Facebook and just add the other information that I need to it. I will see. If you have any suggestions, or if you need anything from Right On Consulting Agency, please let us know. That's how I got into the cover letters. It was a request. So I don't mind taking requests. I have fallen in love with the research process. So I am researching. I don't mind researching. I love researching various information. So just a plug for the resource that I am using. I know the title of the book is called Understanding English Grammar. It is a blue book. It has several authors. I cannot remember the authors, but it does. I do put the book on the Series 4, Part 4 at the very, very end. I do highlight the book, and I'm going to try to remember to see the book out or have the book with me when I do the next live video, because I just keep forgetting. I may just post it so you guys can see it. And that way, because I don't want to plagiarize. This is where I'm getting my information from these guys. Not all of it. I try to say, hey, in the video I watched and that kind of thing, or Kenneth Beare said in his article, so that I am giving credit where credit is due. This is not my information. The examples are more or less mine, but some of the takeaways are not mine. And again, some of this information is common knowledge. We know English is a world language. We know we just don't speak it over here in the United States. So that's a whole nother series, plagiarism and unintentional plagiarism and intentional plagiarism. So maybe I'll get into that eventually. I do believe next, after grammar, we're going to get into punctuation a little bit more, so that I can go over some punctuation rules with you guys. So please, if you have requests, let us know. We are more than willing. I am more than willing to do the legwork and the research for your request. and I love doing it. So it doesn't bother me to get the request and produce other videos or come on live and produce a whole series. Like I got another series from a workshop I did yesterday that's kind of brewing and getting started. You know, some of this stuff is just taking a life of its own in the sense of I'm doing one part and then this is how it forms. I start researching one part, or I read a book here and it catches my attention and then it turns into a series. So that's how they're formed. So if you have any suggestions, just let me know. And I can't say how soon I'm going to get on it, but I will be very, very mindful that the request is there and I can start going ahead and do the research, because I didn't know the cover letter series was going to be as big as it turned out to be, but I'm grateful because it gives me an easy transition into October. So I hope to see you guys soon. Please share this video, like this video, comment on this video whenever you see it so that I'll know what you think. Have a great evening, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.